At Victim Witness, we believe in building relationships, not only with the good people we serve, but also with our partners in the county and state who help us to carry out our mission. We strive to provide every possible resource and the most informed guidance to those in need. A collaborative effort allows all of our advocates to keep victims informed, empowered, and feeling safe as they navigate a path that they never expected to find themselves on. We are proud and honored to do this work and promise to be beside you all the way.
Make sure that I am fully attentive and paying attention. I feel like eye contact is a very important thing when helping validate somebody's feelings. I also think that a way to help them feel safe while telling the story is understanding the stages of trauma. There is definitely different feelings that come up through the stages, and I feel like it's very important to understand that so you can be able to validate those feelings as they're coming up, as they're telling you their story. Another way I feel like it, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they feel safe while telling their story is being able to listen to what they're asking. I feel like sometimes it's hard they don't even understand what they're asking. But through the chaos, I feel like you really dig through, you could really find that question that they're really needing answered.
First, I want to empower them. I want to give them the opportunity to tell their story in a safe and comfortable environment, but also have them understand that ultimately this is their choice. This is something that they have the power to do something about. And if that means they tell me bits and pieces or whatever they're comfortable with, and that's fine. That's great. If they want to tell me more and they feel more comfortable as they get to know me and everything, then that's great too. But at the end of the day, it's their choice and what they want to tell me and what they want to divulge, and I would have to respect whatever information they give me. Other ways that I would empower them or make them feel safe, I guess, tell them a little bit more about myself and have them know there's a person behind the uniform. And sometimes that's maybe sharing a little personal information about my own experiences going through something very challenging and very intimidating, something like this, like talking to a uniformed police officer. And other times it's just a matter of making them feel heard, listening to whatever they have to say, being active and listening, and responding positively to whatever kind of questions and things that they may have. Again, just trying to make sure that they are coming to a human being with their problems, someone who is empathetic and is trying to understand the difficult situations that they find themselves in. And I want to try and project that as much as possible. Other ways that I can show that this is a safe and comfortable person and place for them to come to is just making them feel like they're in a secure and safe place where there's no one's going to be watching them, and none of the information that they're giving to me is going to be divulged unless it's something that they choose to do, or it's something that happens throughout the course of the investigation, which I would explain to them if that's necessary. But again, I want to make sure that they understand it's their choice and that they're empowered to do what they feel is comfortable. I would also want to be as transparent as possible with this whole process, because it's something that 99% of people never experience or go through. And the fact that it is such a long and grueling process sometimes, and it's very traumatic and difficult to deal with, it's something that I want to be transparent with right away, because the sooner people know that, the sooner we can help and get resources to them to help them fight this battle. So it's, again, empathy, transparency, and empowerment. Those are the three big things that I try to offer during an initial interview. From there, just try to get them as many resources as possible afterwards, and let them understand that even after the interview, even after everything that happens we don't forget about them. We continue to follow up. We continue to make sure that they're safe, that they're in a good mental space, because again, talking about something traumatic is not easy, and we understand that. We want to try and be there for them as much as we can, and understand that this doesn't just end with 1 or 2 interviews at a trial. It's an ongoing, continuing process of healing, and we have resources and we have things to offer in that sense to ease that.
As a district attorney, one of the things I think that's most important to make victims feel safe and supported when they're coming forward and when they're going through the system as a victim in a case is letting them know that they're not alone, that this is not a situation that only they have gone through, helping them understand that anything that they have to talk about or deal with are things that we've talked about before with other people who have had to go through the same thing. And most importantly, being upfront and honest with them about what the system looks like, what they're going to face as a victim, and the likely outcome of their case as it heads through the system. Honesty is always the best policy, so that when they're coming in, they understand exactly what is going to be happening, so there are no surprises. I think that victims get a sense of hope when they feel like they have people on their side, and the best way that you can be on their side is by being honest to them and communicating the best you can to them throughout the whole process.
So as a police officer, one of the most common calls that we get is a domestic dispute. And a lot of times when we get there, the victims, they often feel unheard, and it's hard for them to get to tell their side of the story. Especially as a police officer in uniform, a lot of victims feel scared and unsure of what's going to happen next in the process. A big part for us to help the victim feel safe while on scene is just to listen. A lot of skills and times that we're on scene, we use the skills that we are employed with through training to just help them and actively listen. A lot of times victims feel like they're not getting the attention that they deserve, especially in a domestic situation. I personally feel that when I'm on a domestic and there's been a victim of a crime, I need to be attentive to them, take them 100% seriously. And a very important aspect about being a victim is, for me, I have to understand as a police officer the difference between sympathy and empathy. I could say I understand until you're blue in the face, but I really don't. I've never been in your situation before. If I'm being empathetic, I can say things like, I don't even believe the situation that you're in. It's very hard for you. But just knowing and having the victim know that you're there for them is very important. Also, another way for them to feel safe is through the victim advocacy program. Ms. Stoddard, who's with our department, does an excellent job of following up and caring for the victims. And on scene, as a police officer, letting them know that Jess will be there for them and guiding them through the process, whether it be to file for a PFA, explaining them the rest procedures in a domestic abuse situation, or even after the incident's over, just following up with them, visiting them at their house a couple days after the incident happens. All those take into consideration for the victim and making them feel as safe as possible.
What I have to say is pretty simple, but sometimes it's one of the hardest things to do, especially if you deal with a large amount of victims on a regular basis. But what I find is always the best place to start is simply listening and not interrupting when they are telling their story. This involves a lot of patience, it involves an investment of time, but what it is communicating to this person is that I'm a safe person to tell these things to, and that they can take their time in piecing together whatever it is that they need to piece together in terms of, traumatic memories or just traumatic instances in general. I think that when we interrupt and when we tend to insert ourselves into those conversations, that's when people typically shut down. So one thing that I always try to remind myself when I am speaking with someone that has experienced some type of trauma is that They have the floor, and when it's time for me to speak and respond, I'll know because they'll let me know.
I feel that one of the best ways victims can be supported coming forward about their stories or their victimization is just for us to be very clear in what next steps are going to be taken. Most importantly, you want to listen to what they have to say, and a lot of times they're afraid to tell you what is going to happen because they're fearful of retaliation, or they just don't understand what can happen. A lot of times with domestic violence, it's not the first time that this has occurred. It could have occurred 10 times before, and this is only the first time that they're reaching out to a police department. A lot of times out of fear for a number of reasons. So I always like to imagine that this is a very scary step for the victim, just because they don't know what's going to happen next. So very clearly, just understanding that, whether it's an arrest or just forwarding their case to the victim witness, such as we have at Laura Paxton, knowing that, letting them know that somebody will be there to hear them and reach out to them, whether that's me as a police officer on scene or a victim witness advocate in the future. It's just important to let them know that they're not alone in their journey right now. So I think, again, just letting them know that what these next steps are going to be, letting them know that they're not alone, are all very important things.
First and foremost, I would propose that we would revolutionize the word victim. The terminology alone is used loosely, and it puts those of us who have been through something already terrible as part of a stigma that sets the tone that we are any different than anybody else. We should not be labeled as a victim for the sole reason that we lived through a traumatic experience, because everyone's experience is different. We should not be labeled as a victim because once we rightfully take our power back, we can't be left living under the shadow of a word that's fundamentally used to diminish one's worth. Those who have experienced rape, sexual assault, child abuse, or domestic violence, etc., will likely further refrain from displaying trust with anybody, not necessarily permanently, but in the near future. With all this being said, in order for both men and women to feel safe and more inclined to come forward with their stories, we need to first make them feel comfortable, and not that they are labeled as anything other than who they are as an individual. I feel that we could encourage more people to come forward if all of the information provided is expressed with full transparency. Personally, I felt that I couldn't put faith in a system that felt like it was failing me. If we could even put more trust in knowing our rape kits don't just get tossed in the back of a medical facility closet somewhere. I would also remind somebody endlessly if they needed to hear that predators don't always have a specific target. Though what happened to me was indeed traumatic, it was something that I experienced and made it through to where I am now. We need to change the trajectory that because something happened to us, that we are victimized. In my opinion, the more you consider yourself a victim, the more of a victim you become. What defines me is who I am outside of my life's experiences. I am a fiancé, a mom, a daughter, a sister, an aunt, and a friend. I want to help others find themselves again through their experience. I could not have changed what happened to me, but what I can change is how I see the world from here on out, and how the world sees me. I never want someone to look at me as a victim. They can choose to look at me as someone who guided their survival through a traumatic experience based on my own, but I don't want anyone to ever think they are any less of a person because of something that happened to them at the hands of another. And it's our job to remind them that they are now safe and they are not at fault.
I think the best thing we can do to make sure that the victims feel supported is by, number one, being empathetic, listening to their story, not trying to understand what they're going through because everybody is going through something different. A lot of people don't experience the same things that the victim has experiences where they don't have similar, past life experiences. So just listening to what they're saying, being empathetic, and making sure that all the resources that are available are provided to them. So if they have a question or they have any concerns, they have all the information that they need to reach out to that appropriate person so they can coordinate the proper care for them.
I think as a prosecutor working with victims, the most important thing is first of all, for us to listen to them and hear what their concerns are. What I may think their primary concerns are as they're working through the criminal justice system may be something that's completely different than what their concerns are. So I think that that's the first thing that we need to do is to be very good listeners so that way we fully understand what their biggest concerns are and how to address those for them. What I always tell victims in all of my cases is that I can never predict what the outcome will be as they go through the criminal justice system. I've had folks who have felt like they've received the justice that they want, but I've had others who feel as though they've been a little left short on that situation. But nevertheless, what I always tell them and what I've always strived to do is to make sure that I am doing the best that I possibly can as they navigate through the system. I tell them, I share with them that I have children, that I have a mom, a sister, friends and family, of course, that I care about, and that what I owe to them is to handle the case in a way that I would want someone to handle the case if it were my family or my friends that were going through the system. I think if you tell people that and you're sincere about it, I think people then are willing to work with you to understand that it's not a perfect system, but we're trying to do our best to work their cases and to receive justice for them.
As an assistant district attorney, when I meet a victim for the first time, they've typically been through a lot already. Not only the situation that they've been in, how many times they might have tried to get away from their abuser, or if they're not even ready to get away from their abuser. They've had to recount their story oftentimes to police, to hospital staff, to friends and family sometimes. They've had to go over things numerous times and are now being subjected to a process that doesn't often put their needs first. So when I meet with a victim, my goal is to really try to understand their story and what they need, and try to do the best that I can to put their needs and their goals ahead of whatever this system has put them through. That's not always possible, and it's not always possible for us to get what they want out of this, but the best thing that I can do for them is to just listen, because sometimes they've been put through situations where people aren't hearing what they're saying or what they want, and so being trauma-informed means listening and doing the best that we can to meet the needs that they need at that time and going forward through the process.
I think being a trauma-informed investigator is about equal parts training and experience. On the training side, I think there are plenty of opportunities for investigators to take classes or meet with people or look at case studies of situations involving all sorts of trauma and people who've gone through it. On the experience side, I think it's important to actually sit down and talk to people who have been through trauma and all sorts of different types of trauma in cases that you're actually handling. And I think it's not so much about having gone through a specific type of trauma yourself, but I think when you marry the experience from an investigator side and any sort of training that they can get, I think you wind up with an investigator who can start to piece together what a victim might be going through or where their headspace might be at and be able to help them effectively.
For me, being trauma-informed means that I'm making decisions that are in the best interest of my victim. I'm understanding the science behind why they are behaving the way they are, and I'm seeking ways to help them heal as much as possible. Sometimes that may mean resolving a case in the best interest of the victim or how they want to proceed, and sometimes it may be a way to find a resolution to keep the victim away from their abuser. Either way, everything I do should be trauma-informed so that I can assist the victim in moving forward and understand how I can best make decisions on their behalf or work with them to make decisions together.
Hope that you would one day live in peace and at peace with the situation that you've been through, that you would see your situation as something that made you into who you are, and that you would use that for good. So I see hope as the place you want to be, that new beginning after you have worked through a very challenging time and situation. And with your support system and your own personal strength, you focus on that hope and build that new beginning.
I think the most important thing to bear in mind when asking that question is that every person who becomes victimized by someone else, their journey is going to look a little different from anyone else's, because each of us are different. Each of us move through life in a way that is specifically our own. And when that way of moving gets disrupted by trauma, what we look forward to, what we aspire to, is going to look a little different for everyone. I think ultimately what's so important about hope for victims of crime is that whatever that image is, it's not going to look exactly like where they were before, because trauma can irrevocably change you. What it can be, though, is a new feeling of wholeness. They may not have the person that they used to have. They may not feel the same way about things that they used to feel, but what they do have is a sense of safety that gets restored. They have a sense of community that gets restored, and they have a sense of self that gets reinvigorated. Being victimized can really break you down. It can make you question your own reality. It can make you question your own perception. And from my viewpoint of working with victims of crime, the most important part of hope is the knowledge that their self is still there and will remain.